Alright, hello. I want to talk about Frost Mage and the War Within and the major problems facing it. I'll try and make this, quick, snappy, because I'm not planning to have any Subway surfers running in the bottom to keep you entertained. So the first one's going to be about Cold Snap. Right now, if you use Cold Snap, it just overwrites any of your charges, right? So if I'm just waiting for this to get closer, whenever I press Cold Snap, it just completely overwrites its CDR, right? So even if I only had like 8 seconds until my next ice block and I need it now, using Cold Snap would just fully overwrite it. That sucks, right? It gets you use of your major defensive when you want it, but not necessarily more uses in an encounter, right? And if you didn't know, Frost is actually pretty bad at living. If we're looking like Mythic Raid, Deaths, top 25% players for all bosses, Frost is pretty down here. It's with Boomkins. Boomkins down bad. Alright, and you can see Arcane and Fire are up here. And the reason for that is that their spec defensives are way stronger. So Cold Snap, not very good. Not very good at the moment. And we have, Time Spiral gives you temporary charges of your movement ability. So I can't Cold Snap just give you a temporary charge of your, major defensives, like your barrier and your ice block. And then you will actually get an extra use in the encounter, and you won't reset all the natural CDR progress you spent, the past 2 minutes working up towards. Makes it a lot more fluid for when you're using your Cold Snap rather than making it a pain point in the rotation. Or even just make it always have 2 charges of barrier and 2 charges of block. Does that sound OP? Yeah, it does sound a little OP. But, we're looking at a situation like this, and we're looking at a situation like this tier or even in past tiers where people are literally playing Fire for survivability, right? You can play into the Mage specs in push keys this season. A large part of the reason why people are playing Fire is Cauterize. Prismatic Barriers are arguably a better defensive than Cauterize, but that only matters when things start one-shining you through your barrier, really. Because Mage is really, really good at living something they know will hit them and kill them, and really, really bad about living something that they don't know will kill them, which is what Cauterize does for you. Because the majority of the time, when something hits you that might have killed you as Fire, where you're like over-pressing defensives as Arcane or Frost to compensate for the fact that you don't know it will kill you, it doesn't kill you anyway, and your Cauterize doesn't proc. And so Fire just kind of has this like cascading effect through that. Might have been a bit of a bad way to phrase it, but hopefully you understand what I mean. Essentially, people have been asking for Cauterize on the general tree for the entirety of Dragonflight since the trees were made. Let's do that. Even if you want to look at like the rogue tree, they literally have G-Death on their general tree. Put Cauterize on the general tree. And what's even better is this is literally a choice node with elusiveness, which is essentially the same thing as Prismatic Barrier. So throw Prismatic Barrier and G-Death in the choice node. If you really want, put Cold Snap in there too, right? And then, hell, the problem's solved. People will take whatever they want, right? And you're not hurting any specs viability in different modes of content that way, all right? And if you say that's broken, the Rogue literally has it. They already have it. Let's have some consistency, Anyway, here, Coldest Snap. Honestly, I don't think it should reset Frozen Orb. We already have massive CDR on Frozen Orb. Most of the times, you're not resetting that much value from it. I think it should just empower Comet Storm by like 50%. Frost has a very bloated AoE rotation at the moment. I was talking to someone I was coaching the other day, and they mentioned how it was tough adjusting to Frost and Mythic Plus because you have like 15 buttons you're using rotationally when you count your AoE freezes and everything. And I think that's true. I think there's just a lot of CDR going on, a lot of buttons to press as Frost. I don't think it really makes sense for Cold Snap to reset Orb as well. Just reset Comet Storm and have that Comet Storm do like 50% increased damage. Or even better, apply like a 5-second buff where your Comet Storm just does 50% increased damage, because then that'll apply to the previous Comet Storm too. I think that'll feel great. Because right now, I don't really look forward to pressing Cone of Cold, right? Because you're pressing like Orb, Blizzard, Comet Storm, Cone of Cold, Orb, Comet Storm, Blizzard, and it just feels like a maintenance cycle rather than like a high point of burst in my mind. So that's my opinion. Here, Frozen Orb, for love of God, make this thing stop moving. You can put it on your cursor for PvP, make that like some random choice node here for free points or something. It's ridiculous, right? But balance around this always hitting mobs, and it does not always hit mobs. Most of the time, it's 30 yards away from where you want it to be. Right? About you get 5 seconds of every frozen orb before it goes to Narnia, unless you're next to a wall, really. So let's fix that. And then we can have some good balancing for once. Third gate, it's too bloated. I don't mind the third gate, right? We take everything we want to take right now. But the issue is we'll never take Cold Front, right? And that's okay. I don't really want to take Cold Front, but in case they do something like Hero Talents to make you want to take Cold Front, that's just not possible, right? These are way too valuable of points. Like Splay Ice is incredibly central to the Frost theme, and we just have to take it always. Thermal Void, our class doesn't work without it. Ray Frost, sure, not necessary. Freezing Winds, I would also argue Freezing Winds isn't necessary, except you need it to get Coldest Snap. Slick Ice, not necessary. Chain Reaction, not necessary. However, these 3 points right here are always necessary, just because they make it so the stats you have aren't dead. For instance, this is like Mastery's value. Yeah, this is Mastery's value without Hailstones talented, okay? It's like a 6.57 DPS, all right? A bit of a bad comparison because things are all going to have different DPS things, but if you look at just taking the points out of Deep Shatter, which it was in, and putting those in Hailstones instead, your Mastery jumps an astronomical amount, right? It essentially increased in value almost 50%. Okay, so without Hailstones, Mastery is a fully dead stat. And if you take Glacial Spike, your Mastery further increases, right? By like another 20% or something. So, yeah, you can't really avoid Hailstones at all unless you want to avoid Mastery entirely. And we also have an issue where Haste scales like trash, right? So this is our Haste when we use Bloodlust, right, with Temporal Warp, and this is our Haste when we aren't using Bloodlust and we aren't using Temporal Warp, right? So it just, again, scales 10% better. So even more than 10%, because this is the after effect. So we're just running into this issue where a lot of our talents majorly affect the value of our stats, and not really in a good way, right? Because without Hailstones, Mastery's a dead stat. With Temporal Warp, Haste loses a lot of value because we just have too much of it, which is going to play into it later. But yeah. Next, actually talking about Cold Front, Fractured Frost. Listen, Fire, for Fire, it can afford to take Living Bomb and Convection to get to Firefall and not even use these 2 points. Like, these 2 points are worthless to it, and have this still be a 6% DPS increase. Okay? Frost, our 2 dead points aren't worth taking Cold Front, especially because Cold Front is very poorly designed. It's Frostbolts and Flurries, and it's 30 of them, even, whereas this is Fireballs and Pyroblasts. For Frost, its spender should be adequately considered Ice Lance, not Flurry. Doing Frostbolt and Flurry makes this a degenerate playstyle. And even this is also degenerate, because it has no cooldown. I mean, its cooldown is the same as the GCD, right? You're never going to be casting Frostbolts lower than the GCD, really, realistically. So this encourages you to spam Frostbolt and Flurry and never press Ice Lance. No, that's never going to happen, especially when this isn't a guaranteed chance or anything. This should be Ice Lance instead of Flurry, and then remove this talent because it's trash. You would need to fully rework it, because Frostbolt hits like a wet noodle. This doesn't even generate extra icicles or anything. The only thing it does is it adds extra points towards Cold Front. And it can't not be guaranteed. We don't have room in our rotation to be spamming Frostbolt and AoE when we have to be pressing Blizzard every 5 seconds, pressing Orb every 12 or something, right? And then you got all the Ice Lancers you're generating from that. So these talents just don't work, right? They don't work right now in their current design. We'd already talked about Hailstones, and that's effect on Mastery. This one, Freezable Mobs. Right now we have 3 AoE rotations, right? You have you got the normal AoE rotation, which is against unfreezable mobs, right? Where you're holding your flurries for Glacial Spike. You have your freezable AoE rotation, where it's against wholly freezable mobs, and you're not holding your flurries, and you're using your Ice Nova Ice Nova Freeze and Frost Nova to shatter, GS every time you're doing it to do 2 shatters, right? And in this one, you would actually use Ice Nova above Frostbolt as a filler ability, and then we have our 1 unfreezable mob and multiple freezable mobs, where we're using our Ice Nova / Freeze / Frost Nova, holding Flurry for 3 to 4 Icicles plus to shatter main mob and off targets, right? This is ridiculous. Like, who you're gonna ask people to do this? And it's not like these things are negligible. This is a 20% DPS increase. Okay. This also is like a 20% DPS increase. Right? I may be overstating. This one might be a little lower, but and this is like more priority damage, right? It's like 4% increased single target too. So yeah, these things are very, very valuable, in large part due to our current tier set. But that looks like it's going to be the same for Fated. Even on a non-Fated tier, this is still going to be super important, and none of these are going to go away when we don't have our current tier set, right? They're all still going to exist. It'll just be a little bit less important. I don't think it really makes sense for this to be a thing, right? For you to expect anyone to have to learn this and play this consistently in Mythic Plus. And also it gives us poor balancing, right? Because right now we're OP if we can shatter both our glacial spikes, and we are not very OP if we can't. So yeah, just in my case, I would say let's also throw a talent in here somewhere, because we got a lot of talents that don't exist, like Lonely Winter. Just buff everything and remove this. Piercing Cold, sure, I guess you can leave that. Bone Chilling, get rid of that, whatever, right? If you want to put in some of these talents, like the Frozen Orb cursor thing and whatnot, so we can actually attack from far away. Or in this case, what I would suggest doing with the roots is have a talent where your roots don't root the mobs, for instance. That makes us much better on Sanguine Weeks, and also means we don't mess up our group CC in Mythic Plus when someone's like, oh, let's knock the mobs next so they don't cast, and you're rooting them for your DPS rotation, okay? So instead, they don't get rooted. Maybe they apply like a 30% slow or something, and then they just apply Winter's Chill for 1 second, which is the base duration of the roots anyway, and gives you more than enough time to cast whatever you want to cast in them. Alright? And there you go, boom. It's solved. We only have 1 AoE rotation in that case. And also, by the way, they only give Winter's Chill if they hit like 3 targets. We already have that effect from Coldest Snap. You're not introducing anything degenerate into the single target rotation, and you're making the AoE rotation way better. Right? Great. Great. And then the last point I had was about Time Anomaly and Temporal Warp. So I already showed you, right? Temporal Warp just kind of kills your haste value by about 10% or so. But it's also just supremely bad balancing, right? Any fight where you're not lusting on pull may just bounce around getting like 3-4 lusts in an encounter, okay? And when you don't lust on pull, you do trash damage. And it's not realistic to expect people to lust on pull all the time. And it's also not particularly fun to just have a stat that's kind of killed in value from you going really high into it. Like Arcane, if you drop Temporal Warp, take Time Anomaly, Arcane gives way more haste. Gives like 30% haste, because it has the same problem of haste losing so much value when you have Temporal Warp. And the issue with Time Anomalies is just, it's insanely RNG, right? And also for Frost, Time Anomaly is weak, super weak. Icy Veins for 8 seconds, it doesn't even give you the damage buff. You don't have Water Lily to generate the Brain Freeze from Water Jet. Fingers of Frost is useless. This should give you Brain Freeze at least. Time Warp is the best one. Like, getting your main CD or your main proc is horrible for Frost at the moment. We don't want Fingers of Frost. We want it to give us Brain Freeze or something. And Icy Veins for only 8 seconds is not valuable at all when we even get the nerf version of Icy Veins, right? So it's only 20% haste, and it doesn't give us any damage amp. So, yeah. Anyway, those are kind of all my thoughts about how Frost needs to change next expansion. I'll probably do another one. I want to talk about hero talents a bit. Maybe I'll do something like this for the other specs. I'm not sure. I don't have as strong feelings about the other specs, really. So, yeah. Okay. Have a good rest of your day. Let me know any comments, questions you got down below.